Mr. Prime Minister, thank you for this opportunity. You come from an academic community, academic background. How do you explain to students today the current state of Turkey's foreign policy towards major world conflicts like Israel, Gaza, Russia, Ukraine, USA, China? What is important for the students to know about the Turkey's stand in the world now?
Yes, first of all, let me clarify my position in general and how do I apply this to the current situation. The strategic characteristics of a country is specified by two main parameters, time and space, or history and geography. So Turkey is right at the center of Afro-Eurasia. My concept strategic depth, when I didn't mean just an influence on geography, but the general characteristics of Turkey. Where is Turkey located? Turkey is not located as an island in Atlantic or in a landlocked country in Asia or Europe. Turkey is a country right at the center of Afro-Eurasia. I don't say only Eurasia, Afro-Eurasia, because of our connections to Red Sea, Suez Canal, and our relations with Africa. So, historical background is that Turkey has special relations with almost all of the societies, countries in this geography. So Turkey has relations, for example, in historic relations with Somalia. And Turkey was, when I was Prime Minister of Foreign Affairs, Turkey was the first country opening embassy in Somalia when there was no one in Somalia from the international community. And when there was a civil war in Kyrgyzstan in 2010, I was there as the first minister, together with the interim President Rosa Atambayeva, for a peace. Or in Balkans, if there is any tension in Bosnia, Turkish people are alerted because of historical linkages. So this is the characteristics of Turkey. Now, when I wrote my book, it was a response to post-Cold War era. So I said Turkey is not just a flag country or a peripheral country of NATO, like in Cold War, but Turkey has a new situation. Therefore, I declared, when I became chief advisor, as the new foreign policy, I declared a balanced relations between global powers. Turkey is, yes, a member of NATO, a candidate for EU, but also a historic neighbor of Russia, and a special relation with China and other countries, Japan. So, therefore, from the Turkey to all other neighboring countries, neighboring regions, going to like a circle spreading outside, going to global powers. I said zero problems with our neighbors as the first principle, effective policies in regional countries for stability and peace in Middle East, in Caucasian Balkans. And third principle was balanced relations with global powers. Now the situation of global powers is changing. It is not like 1990s, not like 1980s. When Francis Fukuyama declared the end of history in 1918, I was a bit young academician. I wrote an article and I submitted to International Studies Association Convention in 1991, declaring that this is not the end of history. This is history will be accelerated. And the real powers, I said 4 stages. The first stage is unilateral supremacy of US. The second stage is the emergence of real powers. Third stage is the competition of rival powers, real powers. And fourth stage is change of the geopolitical axis of power. Now we are at the third stage. Real first 1990s was the unilateral supremacy of US. After 9/11 and after intervention to Iraq and Afghanistan and after 2007 famous speech of Putin in Munich conference and rise of Chinese economy, So China and Russia, especially China, with a huge economic capacity, came to the picture. India has risen
Yes.
as an important player in Asia. So new powers are emerging. The traditional powers like France, Germany, Britain, US, Western powers, relatively their role is their share of economy is declining. From 1945 to 1975, the share of American economy in world economy was almost 45%. Now it has declined to 25% in 1990s, now almost 15 to 20%, while the share of China is increasing. So real powers, I call it is in my book, Systemic Earthquake, published in Cambridge University Press in 2020. I say multiple balance of power is emerging, not one-sided balance of power like in 19th century, multiple balance of power based on subjects, geography, and capacity. So in world economy, balance of power is between China and US and EU. Russia has a less role because Russia is, I think, 10th manufacturing country in the world, not like other. But geopolitically, because of being nuclear power and because of being member of UN Security Council, Russia, Europe and United States is almost like post-Cold War, like Cold War, bipolar. So, and the crisis. So in this situation, the best option for Turkey is balanced relations with all these global power players. Special, I think, if I was in power today, I would accelerate Turkish EU process because EU needs Turkey in this strategic era. And recently I published an interview in a German newspaper today. I said that Turkish EU relations has a window of opportunity now.
So you mean, what do you mean by accelerating? Because in your opinion, is this the biggest historical lesson Turkish leadership has failed to learn? I mean, to not accelerate it is needed, the EU membership.
Yeah, I have always promoted Turkish EU relations because I think, like in the past, this was true. This is even more true today. EU needs Turkey to be a global power in order to compete Russia, China, and in order to be a strategic player in world affairs. Turkey needs geopolitical extension to critical zones of world affairs, and the only critical extension, strategic extension, could be through Turkey, to Middle East, to Central Asia, to Caucasia, to even Africa. So Europe needs Turkey, but Turkey needs Europe as well, because Europe is the main trading partner of Turkey, and Turkey is in an economic crisis now. Turkey needs EU to enlarge, for example, custom union to resolve this economic crisis. Meanwhile, Turkey has to have good relations with Russia, and Turkey has this chance. I think in Ukrainian crisis, Turkey followed a very wise policy as a neutral power, having relations with both sides. Turkish-Russian relation is special. When I was Minister of Foreign Affairs, Prime Minister, I always promoted this relation as well. And this is not alternative to each other. This is not zero-sum game. If you have good relations with Russia, you have to fight or you have to have crisis with EU or vice versa. It's not true.
Yes.
My policy basically is you can have good relations based on strategic nationality and based on vision. And this is achievable. And we were successful when we achieved all this together, like early 1910, 1912, 13. We had excellent relations with Russia, and we had an accession process with EU. Unfortunately, after 2016, after my resignation, Turkish-EU relation has almost been frozen. This is the problem. Now we can accelerate this relation based on certain practical steps. One is visa liberalization process for Turkish citizens. In 2016, it was supposed to be given when I was Prime Minister. we were very close to have this visa liberalization regime with EU. And yeah, unfortunately, after my resignation, that has been stopped. Second, custom union should be updated for Turkish EU economic relations. We need this as well, Turkey needs. So there are several steps to be taken to have a mutual confidence to each other. And Russia wouldn't be against this relation because Turkish-Russian relation, if it is good, that will be a good, Turkey could be a good facilitator between Russia and EU.
One question,
Similar,
yes.
yeah. Similarly with US,
Mhm.
of course, Trump administration's policy vis-a-vis Gaza, vis-a-vis Middle Eastern issues is not very promising for peace. But at the end of the day, US needs Turkey in Syria, in Iraq, in the Middle East, and Turkey could manage Turkish-EU relations. So it is a chance for Turkey in this historical period to use diplomatic flexibility and a visionary approach for the future.
Speaking about this, as global multipolarity returns, do you think Turkey should align itself more like balancing great powers, or should Turkey pick a side, or should lead a completely independent politics in order to lead the region?
We are not in Cold War, so there is no just 1 or 0 game. So I always approach to foreign policy that if you are able to have complementary relations, you can be successful. Conflicting relations will bring you chaos and crisis. Complementary relations means your relation with Russia should complement your accession process with EU. Your membership of NATO should be compatible with your relations with Russia. So with this, you are in fact having a maneuvering place. But you should be honest. You should be visionary. It should not be like playing with everyone, but in an inconsistent way. No, you have to have your own principles, but at the same time, you have to keep your relations with all the global powers in a wiser manner.
I see. One question about this. Looking a little bit back, do you think your government's early push for regime change in Syria, rooted in a zero problems with neighbors doctrine, was a miscalculation that in a way destabilized both Syria and Turkey? Because if you had a policy of cautious engagement, how different might the region look today?
First of all, when I said zero problems with neighbors, I didn't declare a very utopic policy. I am a historian. I know that even the best neighbors could have some problems. But what did I do? What did I try to do? So in Cold War, Turkish psychology of Turkish policymakers was that Turkey is surrounded by enemies. Because of Cold War, we had very tense relations with Soviet Union, with Bulgaria, with Romania, and all the Warsaw Pact. With Greece, we had historic and also conjectural problems in Aegean Sea, Cyprus. With Iran, we had historical rivalry. With Arab countries, with Syria, we didn't have even any relation, any high-level visit, etc. So if you want to reform your country's foreign policy, you have to make a psychological shift. And when I said this policy in 2003, when I was chief advisor, my main purpose was make a psychological shock, psychological shift, that we are not surrounded by enemies. We are surrounded by neighbors. We are surrounded by good friends. So when I said zero problems with neighbors, that I explained, in 2010, we had excellent relations with Syria. We had high-level strategic cooperation mechanisms. In one day, we signed 52 agreements between two cabinets. We had joint cabinet meetings. We lifted visas, visa-free travel, free trade agreement, and in 2010 October, we declared Turkey, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan for countries, Leviathan bloc. And we declared this Shamgan, like Schengen. Sham is Damascus, so Shamgan. So that it was an excellent time. But the difference was that at that time, Bashar Assad, although he was not a democratic leader, although there was one party rule, although there was some sort of autocratic regime, there was not real confrontation relations between regime and the people. But you have to have always priorities in your approach. For us, Syrian nation is more important than the Syrian leadership. Similarly, Turkish nation will prevail. Turkish governments will change, but Turkish nation will prevail. Bulgarian nation will prevail. Bulgaria government might be changed like in last 4 or 5 years. Several Bulgarian governments were established. So when Syrian regime start to oppress its own people, we tried to warn Syrian regime not to do so. And I visited several times Bashar Assad. Last international, politician, statesman visiting Damascus in August 2011 was me. But unfortunately, instead him to make some small reforms, improve relations with his own people, he oppressed. He even used chemical weapons. So it was not because of our intention these zero prompts have changed. Secondly, in 2012, our neighbor has changed. Our neighbor has changed. What I mean, the Turkish-Syrian border was controlled by the opposition. Out of 12 gates, 11 was not under the Syrian regime control. So you can have zero prompts when you have a counterpart. But the Syria regime was not able to control 50% of the territories in 2012. Later, I was accused, I was criticized because of supporting Syrian opposition, even in Turkey. But I always said, if a regime fights against his own people, no regime can survive.
I understand. Can I ask you one thing as a political philosopher about this, about the regime changes? Because I'm eager to hear your opinion. How do you view as a political philosopher this tension between Islamic values and democratic pluralism, and also how do you interpret as an academic the annulment of Imamoglu's university diploma? I mean, do you think that legal mechanism can be used against political rivals? And what about state legitimacy?
You see, first of all, let me clarify my position. I don't see any tension between Islamic values and democratic pluralism. They are compatible. It is up to based on how you see Islamic values. For me, basic Islamic values are referred to human rights, and I don't see any tension. And in my political career and academic career, I, as a devout Muslim, or anybody can have his own religious view, I didn't see any internal tension in myself. When I defended freedom of intellect, freedom of thought, as an academician, this is for me basic value. I don't see any problem with between this and Islamic approach. And in Islamic law approach, the basic principles are from the time of Prophet until today: protection of life, protection of intellect, protection of belief, freedom of belief, protection of property, protection of generations, let me say. So protection of intellect is one of the basic principles. It is how you interpret this. So there is a very monolithic interpretations of Islam. either from inside or from outside.
Mhm.
For example, dictatorial regimes in the Middle East. Uh, Bashar Assad was not an Islamist, but he was dictator. Saddam was not an Islamist, but he was dictator. So, and nobody, none of these leaders could be seen as dictators, as Islamic leaders.
I understand.
So, we should not identify Islam with the existing regimes in the Muslim world. And when I opposed to Turkish military interventions in Turkish politics as an academician before and as a politician later, I was not just trying to criticize this secular military intervention, but also I was trying to provide an alternative to it based on the values of nations, not only Islamic, but all the values, historical values of nations, to make it compatible with the consisting conjecture. And in that sense, when you come to Turkish politics today, I had differences of opinion between me and existing government and President Erdogan in 2016 based on this main approach. I was against any, anything against freedom of thought. I was clearly against corruption. A corrupt regime cannot have a reference to Islam. So Islamic, in that sense, Islamic value is respect to human dignity for me, respect to human dignity, respect to human intellectual capacity, respect to different nations, different ethnicities, different religious traditions. These are my values. And today, definitely there are differences of opinion between me and the existing government. And in fact, I was the first and the only prime minister who resigned as prime minister and established and criticized his own party and established an opposition party. So I could have been comfortable when I didn't oppose. I opposed to these policies, not only based on democratic values, based on Islamic values. My personality, nobody can separate. I am a Democrat. I am a Muslim. So when I oppose something, both of these values, democratic values and Islamic values, are in my mind. So this is basically where I stand.
I understand. Finally, everything we see in global politics can be conceptualized, especially by an academic. In a remarkably short time, the second Trump administration has changed many things that have guided the international order since the end of World War II. Do you think the world needed such kind of transformation? I mean, rejection of treaties, of organizations, of economic institutions, and so on. The world needed this transformation or not?
Definitely not. I mean, the world needed a transformation, not in this direction, just the opposite direction. When we were defending reforms and criticizing UN structure, we were not against UN. We were against the oligarchic structure of UN because of P5. So P5 nations have all the power of decision. But we were defending UN values. And US was, at the end of the day, US-American, Pax Americana, let me say, in 20th century, after 1945, emerged based on three pillars. One is UN system against British, French colonialism dissolution. American legal international reference was UN. And the location itself, even in New York. Second is the system of alliances, NATO and SEATO, CENTO, other alliances, to control the geopolitical rimland, to contain Soviet Union and later Russia, and now China. Third is dollarization of world economy. Dollarization of world economy means free trade free trade all over the world, especially after globalization, and World Trade Organization. So now, symbolically, if we refer to UN and associated principles or institutions of UN, like Human Rights Council, reference is Madame Roosevelt, Eleanor Roosevelt, the American First Lady, and American principles of human rights. And Human Rights Council is the continuation of this. Now, America is just, Trump is shaking all these three pillars. UN is being shaken. NATO is being shaken. And World Trade Organization is being shaken. So, in fact, this Trump operation is not only against world order, even that world order is not fully functioning and praised, but also Pax American approach. So the world was needed what? The world was needed as a transformation of UN reform, rather than ending UN, rather than minimizing UN role or pacifying UN organizations. We were expecting more UN, more values, and more participatory UN. There is no African member in UN Security Council, permanent member. So there is no non-Western, except China, etc. So the global South has been ignored. These were the expectations. Millennium reforms of UN was just the opposite direction of what Trump did. So, or climate, he has been withdrawn from climate. So all the main references of last American administrations has been, and more important, even the trust, pacta sunt servanda. If you take pacta sunt servanda out of the international order, there is no order at all. So everybody has his or her choice what to do. Therefore, I see a big chaos out of this. This is not in the interest of the world community. This is not in the interest of United States. And the main problem of UN American strategy in post-Cold War era is this continuity. So what Father Bush did was changed by President Clinton. What did Clinton do was changed by President George W. Bush. What George W. Bush did was, almost nullified by President Obama. What President Obama did was ignored by first term Trump. Then later Biden was really very weak, and then again. So this circulation, this fluctuation in American strategy is affecting world economy in a negative way.
I see. And just really final question. You were a foreign minister and prime minister as well, but based on your experience, what is a fair ending of war like Russia-Ukraine?
I think there is not only Russia-Ukraine war, but also Gaza genocide is against any international norm. In my book, I said in last systemic earthquake, there has been 4 stages, 4 earthquakes, which has changed and made this disorder. One is geopolitical earthquake in 1991, end of Soviet Union, etc. The second one, security earthquake in 2001, 9/11. Third is 2007 and 8 global economic crisis. And fourth is Arab Spring, or some, only not that, some instabilities in post-Cold War era. So now Ukraine, in that sense, is a litmus test. And unfortunately, both sides did not act wisely. There should have been a much better solution in early stages of the crisis in 2012-13, when there was a dispute. Ukraine is a buffer zone state for centuries. And the stability of buffer zone states like Ukraine in this geopolitical arena could only be possible if neighboring powers are agreed on certain principles. And how could it end? First stage should be ceasefire. And in that ceasefire, Russia should recognize Kiev administration as a neighbor, a respected neighbor, and Kiev administration, Zelensky and Ukraine, should accept the basic rights of the minorities in Ukraine. And then step by step, there could be some confidence measures to each other. And it will take years, maybe even decades. But peace should not be achieved only with one step. Peace and stability could be achievable only if you have a vision of peace. I think now Russia has realized that they cannot control all of the Ukraine, and they cannot, decide who will be running Ukraine. A giant strategic power like Russia was not able to control Ukraine, end the war and control Ukraine in last 3 years. So it means this should be a lesson for Russians. For Ukraine, there is another lesson that if you want to be stable, you have to have good and understand respecting relations with your neighbors, including as a big neighbor of Russia, and a historical connection is there. And lesson for EU is the peace in Europe could be achievable, sustainable peace could be achievable only if all members of, let me say, Historical Congress of Vienna, 1815, all of them are in the process. So Russia should not be isolated or should not be kept aside in European affairs. So everybody has to take some lessons out of this Ukrainian crisis. Similarly, in Gaza, Israel has been seen like a super state. Everybody must admit and apply international norms, but Israel is exceptional. There should be no nuclear weapons in the world. Iran should not have, Turkey should not have, but Israel may have. There are UN Security Council resolutions 181, 242, clearly implying two-state solution, but Israel may disregard UN resolutions. Other countries must accept. If Iraq invades Kuwait, Iraq has to withdraw, yes. But if Israel invades Palestine, Israel may continue this for 74 years. This is not order. And especially this evacuation of Gazan people is a human crime, genocide and ethnic cleansing. If a Muslim nation did so in any part of the Muslim world, I am sure US would be very aggressive or international order. This is my main concern. The international community lost its own values to be respected. Territories must be respected, regardless of who is your neighbor. Rights of minorities must be respected, regardless who is your minority. And all the human rights issues should be dealt in a equal manner. There should not be double standards and different criteria on this subject. So if we accept these principles, there could be a way out of this crisis. But I am very cautious and concerned because of Trump's rhetoric, because of Trump's approach to international relations, as if it is a computer game run by him. No, that you are addressing to human beings. You are addressing to human dignities. You cannot insult a president coming to your capital or to your palace. You cannot just decide on your own. This is international arena. So I hope U.S. Wise politicians may take also lessons that they are not the new colonial masters of the world, but they are equal nations like others. That is the only way to achieve peace.